Hello SAO survivors! In November, Sword Online Integral Factor had its worst performance in both rankings and revenue ever. Can't wait people to comment on that very first sentence without any context. In other news, Sword Online Variant Showdown finally kicked off the developer updates, and SAO Recollection fizzled out so much that it's already on a discount in Japan. So once again, welcome SAO survivors, this is Dead Game Report for November 2023, featuring Sword Online Integral Factor, Variant Showdown, and Last Recollection. Now, the people who are interested in these performance graphs and analytics may have realized that I skipped Dead Game Report entirely last month. That's because there was nothing to say about Last Recollection as the game fizzled away without any interest. Variant Showdown had not begun the monthly developer updates despite me waiting the entire October and the first half of November for it, and Integral Factor, as usual, had one of its average months, slightly above average in fact, so it wouldn't have been the most thrilling video ever to just go, yeah, sadly people don't seem to care about Last Recollection despite being the best SAO console game story, SAOVS is completely silent, and Integral Factor did average. You know, that's a boring video. But this month we got some nice stuff to talk about. Now, Integral Factor had its worst ever performance this year in Japan, which as a mobile game that usually ends up being the worst performance ever, as the yearly trajectory of mobile games, they usually go down. However, that's a wildly misleading statement without its context. SAO Integral Factor kicked off the first couple days of December incredibly well, earning more than a quarter of its revenue in an average month in just 4 days. More than a quarter of the usual revenue in about 1/10 of the month. And that's pretty much the missing context on the previous statement I mentioned, and we'll get to all of that in a second. And while Integral Factor is doing great so far early in December, you know, you can make my December just as great. This episode of Dead Game Report is sponsored by me. Well, my Amazon link for Sword Online Platinum Collector's Edition by Yempress. This huge box is the ultimate gift for anyone who wants to read the Sword Online light novels. A beautiful collector's box featuring a special visual from Abeshi, 2 huge hardcover books consisting of Sword Online light novels from volume 1 to 20 with large-sized illustrations that you won't find anywhere else. Volumes 1 to 20, that's the entirety of Aincrad, Fairy Dance, Phantom Bullet, Caliber, Mother's Rosario, Alicizzation's Human Realm, and War of Underworld sub-arcs, the following Moon Cradle side story, and more. They are featured in this huge collection. Additional mini posters of individual light novel covers, a huge poster featuring the Abeshi illustration, and you know what the best part is? It's basically a huge discount compared to trying to get all the light novels individually. Christmas and the New Year's is just around the corner, so don't miss out on this perfect gift, either for an SAO fan friend or for yourself to ask from your loved ones. If you're interested, just head to the description or the pinned comment for the Amazon link. If you're not convinced or are not sure whether it is for you or not, don't worry, I have a thorough unboxing video listing all the benefits as well as the slight disadvantages, so you can have a good idea and think about it yourself. Link for that video as well as the SAO Platinum Collector's Edition by Yempress is in the description. Alright, back to Integral Factor, and then we'll briefly touch on the Variant Showdown dev update and the situation with Last Recollection. As I said, Integral Factor had an average month of October where there's really nothing special to say. It earned 59 million yen in October and was ranked 374 on average throughout the month of October. On Steam, average concurrent player count was just shy of 200, while the peak was 353 players. And then, the following month, November of 2023, it basically hit bottom for both its popularity ranking as well as its revenue. The only reason I'm not saying rock bottom is because even the worst performance ever of the game is so consistent that if you were to look at it without a microscope, it's still literally within a 5% margin of its average performance. It earned 51 million yen in November and on average ranked 404. On Steam, average player count was 162 and the peak dropped to 283 players. On that note, we're gonna go on a little tangent here. While Steam numbers may sound low, keep in mind that Integral Factor is practically a very lightweight mobile game. Most people, aside from story release days, just log in to do their dailies, which takes less than 5 minutes, leading to concurrent player counts to stay quite low. There's simply less players logged on at the same time because the playtimes don't overlap that much between players as they're logging in for 5 minutes and just logging out. The game does not require a high commitment of being logged in, unlike, let's say, as an example, Yu-Gi-Oh! Or League of Legends, where you may just be logged in for 30 to 40 minutes at a time for a single match, for example. In fact, as I said, it's a bit of a tangent, but you can pretty much validate what I'm saying with hourly variance of concurrent player counts. It's why Integral Factor has a generally smooth line in recent data that was not consolidated. Integral Factor in November swung between 150 and 190 players in short periods. That's about an 11% swing up and down from 170. You can find places where you can get that up to 15% if you really look for it, disregarding maintenance periods with no players, of course, but that's still pretty well balanced because people are just logging in for 5 minutes whenever it's convenient for them and then logging out without being logged in. Whereas a game that requires a commitment of 20 to 30 minutes, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, can drop from almost 30k players to under 12k over the course of a day. That's about a 50% variance from the average of 21k up and down. The truth is, games with longer commitments required simply gives you a better idea of the actual player count, since all we have access to are the concurrent player numbers via Steam charts. I do wish we had access to the unique player count, which would be a lot more representative for a low commitment game like Integral Factor. Anyways, that ended up being a bigger tangent than I intended, my apologies, but it should give you an idea about the context of the stat I'm sharing, and context is everything for you to actually understand what I'm talking about, rather than just blindly trusting my word. It's the thing I hate the most about statistics, not informing the audience enough, which ends up misleading them or allowing them to run amok with the most extreme ideas, which are simply not true. Either way, tangent over, let's come back to November of Integral Factor. Well, the performance was indeed within a 5% margin of the average performance. The fact remains that the game had its worst ever performance and popularity ranking so far. That would be quite the alarming fact if I provided no context to it, the same way I'll provide context to the superb performance in early December in a second. The bad performance in November is very easy to explain, honestly. It was simply the period before the beginning of 6th anniversary of Integral Factor. Throughout the month, we had very few events to take part in, not as many effort in banners either, and even if there was effort in the banners, it would not have helped all that much. With every anniversary, we get a new skill power creep mechanic, so people were at this point just saving up for 6th anniversary for that new mechanic and anniversary skills, and the devs were already aware of that fact, as well as aware of the effect of a new floor release, that they simply pushed their new main story release a week further down the line to match up with the 6th anniversary celebrations as well for a big blast. And that explains both the low of November and the big burst of early December. On November 30th, and for all intents and purposes for the revenue and popularity charts that are based in Japan, that's the final hours of November 30th, thus only properly takes effect on December 1st, we had the release of Floor 51 with the new story campaign, the new full burst skills with the usual key visual banner featuring Kirito, Asuna and Koharu, tons of anniversary campaigns and rewards bringing people back. With that context, it's easy to see November was simply barren by design, and December popped off as expected, earning 14 million yen in just 4 days and ranking 270 on average, a very high popularity rank the game hasn't seen since 2 years ago, once again for its anniversary back in December 2021. A similar effect is also seen on the Steam concurrent player counts as well, although I imagine we're observing the effect of the new main campaign here, locking people into a 2-hour story, thus increasing the committed time, which, as previously mentioned, has a large effect on concurrent player counts. The average player count for the first 4 days is somewhere around 240-250 players and is surprisingly on an upwards trajectory over the 4 days, which generally shows that people are enjoying the 6th anniversary campaigns going on and more people are coming in. From the Integral Factor side, that's basically it. This month I had to provide a lot of context, but once December is over, we can actually look back to how it all went down, and if Integral Integral Factor was able to maintain the momentum generated by the anniversary. That's where the actual analysis will happen, and I'll be honest, that's the actually interesting bit for me. Reading numbers and learning their context, that's good and all, but looking back and investigating what went right or what went wrong, now that's the actual fun bit. Alright, now for the shorter sections. First up, Sword Online Variant Showdown. The extended maintenance began at the end of September. I was hoping the dev updates would start in October, but it only started in late November instead. And I'll be honest, it was a kinda lightweight update. Basically, Takeuchi P, the producer of both Integral Factor and Variant Showdown, has outlined how these developer updates will take place and dived straight into some gameplay changes planned for when the game will come back summer of 2024. All developer updates will delve onto a different topic regarding the game, and this first one is improvements in combat. Now, according to the surveys they conducted in-game, the common theme was that the game controls were not all that smooth or intuitive. I'd say that's a pretty accurate take, and it's been a complaint since the launch of the game. Over the months, they had even improved it a lot incrementally, but it never ended up reaching a satisfactory level. So to address it, Takeuchi P shared a couple of specific pain points for improvements. Now, first off, obviously, they are adjusting and or improving the pacing of combat, particularly for characters that caused you to be detracted from an immersive experience. That's a fancy way of putting it. This generally feels like they'll be touching upon characters or actions where you found yourself mashing the buttons going, am I still in an animation cooldown? Heck, the main thing that comes to my mind on this front is the final hit of the auto attack chain on pretty much all characters slash archetypes. So I hope that one gets adjusted to, not just specific characters. A lot of actions like these just felt too stiff and never ended up feeling smooth no matter what they changed. If I remember correctly, dodge cancel was working fine to speed up the combat, but that may just be false memories on my side of how I wished it worked. I'm not even sure anymore after 2-3 months. But this also involves things like the change of battle UI, shortening knockback, camera angle changes, etc. They're assuring that while individually they may seem small changes, they should culminate into a much better experience overall. And that sentiment is something I can vouch for. You'll be surprised how a couple seemingly minor changes can be the difference between sluggish and magnificent. They shared a screenshot as well to go along with this point, although I don't think we can gauge much from a screenshot. This mainly factors into your perceived feeling while immersed in the actual gameplay. Operability was it was a bit of a too vague of a point. They just mentioned some areas that received low scores in surveys and the UI would be improved. Generally, I think the main problem of the game in these areas is it's not the overall design, but rather how heavy or sluggish the game feels. Menus respond too slowly. Scrolling through items or chapters just felt like a slog. Overall game performance felt sluggish rather than the menus or UI design specifically. Although of course the UI and menus have less excuse to tank performance than actual in-game performance, but honestly, I always felt like the menus functioned way worse than the gameplay itself, which was always a mystery to me, so I hope this means they're doing something about that. That's all I can think of on the operability point. Comfort. Reduce download volume. That's clear and concise, but as I read it, all I can think of is, I really hope reduced download sizes also correlates with the load times in general. Downloading a 1 GB update every other week, that's not a particularly worrisome point for me. Worst case, I can wait a couple hours to reach a Wi-Fi somewhere if data caps are becoming a problem. But my real issue is, and has always been, that when I'm trying to farm an event, if I clear a stage in 60 seconds and upon hitting that replay button, I spend anything more than 10 seconds, I will simply not farm. I'm not a developer, of course, so I'm not qualified to comment on why a quote-unquote simple replay needs a full-blown loading screen, but as a player, I can tell you that a 20-second or a 30-second loading screen just to play a 60-second stage, that as a player feels absurd to me in terms of time investment. So again, I really do hope the reduced download volume as a point has a solution about how they deal with their in-game assets in general and will have a positive effect on load times as well. And last but not least, balance. And I think that header is a bit misleading and feels seems underwhelming compared to what it really is, whereas what they're referring to here is that each character should feel unique to play as, aside from the usual power balancing act, and I feel like that's a very important point. That's a very nice one. The latest data mines before the game went into maintenance did feature this was already a goal internally, with a lot of new unique archetypes than the ones we are used to, so I really do hope this will be a good one when the game comes back. As a small addition, they mentioned that they are working on more battle content, but while the general player base will certainly like that mention, you know, oh, more game modes, that is amazing, I am in the opinion, and it seems like the devs are too, considering their communication focus in this one, the way the gameplay itself feels is certainly more important than all the modes or rule changes it may be wrapped around it. So that core experience is what needs to feel solid. But that covers the November developer update for Variant Showdown, as well as some additional context from my side. Hopefully that is helpful to contextualize those changes. The next update is scheduled for late December for now. However, do keep in mind that the plans may change. It's particularly hard to communicate certain things when they are not set in stone internally to begin with, so always take these less as commitments and more as goals they want to reach with their communication. This first update that came in late November was also scheduled a bit earlier as well, but things can change throughout the time. Alright, last but not least, last Recollection. I keep saying over and over that it is quite sad chain of circumstances that led to last Recollection just flying so under the radar. It had the best campaign characterization of all console SAO games, arguably the best combat being a mix of Hollow Realization and Licorice, the largest cast, etc., and an ending celebration to a 10-year journey, yet it was met with fatigue caused by Licorice without a breather in between like previous Akuria games had in the Hollow Fragment, Hollow Realization, Licorice Path, featuring Lost Song and Fatal Bullet in between them. It looks like it is similar in Japan, that the game is already on a 30% discount over there, and now that I've checked before writing the script, that discount is available in the West as well on PlayStation Store, featuring a 30% discount on the Deluxe Edition, which is making it cheaper than the base game. Go get that one if you're getting Last Recollection. Meanwhile, all I can say is the affinity grind is so horrible that I cannot get myself to play the game and unlock the character event so I can 100% it and start working on my ultimate review for the game. Like, I really enjoy the game, but launching it just reminds me of the daunting task of mindless affinity grind, and I just turn it off in an instant and go play League of Legends instead. I really hope they patch in a rebalance for affinity gains at some point, because if I cannot bother with it, the person who's archiving everything, I imagine the average player won't even touch it with a 10-foot pole, and that's not a good sign. It seems like they are also slowly gearing up for the release of the first DLC chapter, so we'll see what happens on that front in the upcoming weeks. There's generally zero buzz around the game at the moment, despite Futami P going around to events and streams. Kinda looking unfortunate, this series of circumstances. Well, 5 pages already, that should be around 20 minutes. It's about time to wrap this Dead Game Report up. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Dead Game Report will return in January 2024, but until then, I'll try to get to that state of the SAO series with you I promised a while back. I wish you all happy holidays and a new year until then, and don't forget SAO Platinum Collector's Edition, great gift, you'll thank me later. Until next time, stay cool.